Hello and welcome. This is Pam Bartha. We are going to get started right away. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me, so please send some love and some hearts. I'm going to pull it up on my computer so that I can see you guys. And my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm going to be sharing with you some amazing insights and research into the true cause of multiple sclerosis. This is a series that we've been doing over the past, this will be the third week now. There we go. I'm going to enlarge this so that I can see you guys as you're joining. So welcome, my name is Pam Bartha. I am the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. And I am super excited to spend this time with you. So please, as I am sharing this amazing information, and when I found all of this information, it's research, but when I came across it, it made me really sad. Really sad because we've known this, or it's been out and studied since 1911. The link between multiple sclerosis and Borrelia or Lyme disease. So I'm going to be sharing some amazing research with you that I really hope that you're going to share with other people that are searching for answers. Share with your neurologists, with your healthcare professionals, because they don't know this information. And the only way change is going to come is if we have an army of wellness champions like you sharing this research and this information. Thank you so much for the hearts and the thumbs up. So you guys can hear me. That's awesome. So you guys are the trailblazers, you are the leaders, you are the forward thinkers, you're going to help us bring this out. And when you look at all of this, you don't need to be a scientist to figure this out. Yes, the science is a little complicated, and I'm going to try to simplify it down for you. I'm going to share a ton of research with you. I'm not going to read all of the abstracts because we'd be here for a long time, but I'm going to give you some concrete proof that some amazing researchers back in the early 1911 and all the way up to 1957, tons of research showing a link between spirochetes in the central nervous system of multiple sclerosis. All right, so please share this with other people. Please give me some love as I'm going through this so that I know you guys are there, because I'm literally staring at my phone right now. And it makes it a lot more fun when I can see that you guys are with me. Just want to say hello to a few people before I get started. Hello, Maureen and Dana Miller and Valerie and Rob. Hi, Rob. Joanna, hello. Hi, Ken and Susan and Sandy and Danielle. So those are just a few people that have just started to join us here. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background information because I want you guys to understand what I'm talking about. So first of all, many people have heard about Lyme disease, but you don't truly understand what Lyme disease is. And Lyme disease is literally an infection caused, or a disease, I should say, caused by multiple infectious agents. The microorganism, or the bug, that's really the cause of Lyme is Borrelia. And I'm going to be talking about Borrelia a lot. And Borrelia is a bacteria. It is a spirochete. It looks like a little corkscrew. It has a flagella tail. So it has this little tail that it whips around, and it can move around really quickly in the body. And Borrelia is related to syphilis. So it's the same type of microbe. It's a spirochete. And spirochetes are the corkscrew bacteria. That's the shape of it. So they're very, very disease-causing in humans. When we are bitten by a tick, or it could be a mosquito, it could be any biting insect, a horsefly, a flea on your cat, we are infected with not just Borrelia, but Babesia and Bartonella and Mycoplasma possibly, and viruses and many, many other infections. And so this talk today is really going to be talking about the link between multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease. So we're going to be focusing on Borrelia, but many of the students I work with, they also have symptoms of Babesia and Bartonella and many other they're called vector-borne infections. That's a more accurate term for them. It means that these bugs travel together and they infect us together, and most of us have been exposed to this. So most of us have been exposed to Borrelia in our lifetime. It's just that some of us have been on too many antibiotics. There have been factors in our life that have caused these certain microbes to get really out of balance to cause a lot of infection. Thank you so much for all the love. I can see all the hearts and the hand thumbs up. Thank you. That means a lot to me, because then it makes it a lot more fun for me, because I'm literally just talking to my phone right now. So anyhow, getting back to the information. So we want to first understand that Lyme. I'm going to be talking about Borrelia today. All right. And just understand that when we have Lyme disease, we usually have multiple infections, fungus, and also many of those other ones I was talking about. And then also another thing I want you to understand is that we're not going to talk about the whole immune system. We're going to talk about one division of your immune system, and those are your B cells. And your B cells make antibodies. So when we have infections, our body has an immune system, an amazing military system that protects us from infection. And the B cells will make antibodies, and this is one of the body's ways, and I'm not going to get into any more detail about it, but you just need to understand, but it's our body's defense against infection. So our body uses B cells to produce antibodies, which help us to fight infection. So when we're diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, one of the ways that they use for a diagnostic tool is that they measure specific groups of antibodies. So this would be, they'd find more IgG antibodies. So Ig means immunoglobulin, which is a big word. But just remember, it's one group of antibodies, IgG. And sometimes in really aggressive forms of MS or more progressive forms of MS, they also measure, I think it's IgM also. So you need this background information so that when I go through these studies, it makes more sense to you. And already, I would hope that you would start to think, well, why are we measuring antibodies? Like, does it sound like maybe we have an infection going on in our body? If our immune system, if our B cells are producing antibodies and that's what they're measuring in MS, then could it be that this is infection? Yes, absolutely. And that's what this series of Facebook Lives that I'm doing. If you were not with me on Valentine's Day, then you'll go back, later on, you can go back and watch the first in the series where I shared about multiple sclerosis and parasitic infections. That would be nematodes in the central nervous system that they're finding in every single case that this one pathologist has researched. In every spinal fluid of a patient that's died of MS, there was 10 out of 10, he found lots of nematodes, worms, little tiny worms and you can actually see them with the naked eye. So we talked about on February 14th. Then last Wednesday, we talked about fungal overgrowth present in multiple sclerosis in the spinal fluid. Today, it's Lyme disease. So I've given you that background information, so go back and look at those. And the reason I'm reminding you of that is that when I go through this today, I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, I've just got to be treated for Lyme and I'm going to be cured. No, there are several infections involved. And we have to do a lot of other things to build up your immune system because Lyme is really difficult to treat, as are parasites and fungus. But when you do multiple things and you support your body and build it up and then treat them, then you can recover. So that's what I want to share with you about the science. Now I'm going to do a little bit of reading and I'm going to make it as simple as possible, but it's so profound, you guys are going to love it. So this is an excerpt or a summary that I've taken out of a book by Dr. Horowitz. He is a Lyme literate doctor. He's amazing. He is speaking. You can watch his videos on YouTube. He is training our healthcare professionals about Lyme disease. I agree with so much that he does. The only thing that I struggle with, and he'll say this too, is that using antibiotics to treat chronic and persistent Lyme, it's really tough and really tricky. And that is not my favorite way to treat Lyme disease. And so I've talked to so many different people that have been on antibiotics for like a year and they are sicker than they were before. And maybe, there's lots of factors involved, but antibiotics are not my favorite way to treat Lyme disease. There's many other ways too that are much better and are not so devastating to our microbiome, those intestinal good guys that we're trying to keep. So in summary, what he shared, really profound. So this is out of his book. It's called Why Can't I Get Better? Many studies have concluded that multiple sclerosis is most likely caused by an infection with Borrelia burgdorferi. Okay, so that is one type of, it's just like Candida albicans, that is one type of Candida. So there are at least 100 different species or cousins of Borrelia that are in North America, and there's different species in different types of the world. So they mutate, they share genes, so they become different. They're like cousins, I would say. So there are at least 5 reasons that they feel that Borrelia is an agent in or most likely causes MS. Number 1, spirochetes have been documented in multiple sclerosis pathology specimens. And I'm going to share a lot of studies in a minute. So they're finding Borrelia in the cerebral spinal fluid of patients that suffer with multiple sclerosis. That's one thing. Number 2, I told you about how Borrelia has this little tail, and it's like a flagella, and it's like a little propeller, and it makes it shoot around the body really, really quickly. They're finding that protein on the flagella is immunologically very similar to human myelin, all right? And they've also found that these infections actually go into the myelin sheath, all right? So those are a couple of other things. Number 3, the demyelination process in multiple sclerosis and in Lyme disease are also very similar. So they're saying that this whole, how our nerves are being attacked and the myelin sheath is being damaged, it's very similar in both Lyme disease and in multiple sclerosis. They both can cause inflammation in the eye. So MS and Lyme disease can cause inflammation in the eye and in the spinal cord, leading to a loss of vision and difficulty walking, making it difficult to differentiate between these 2 diseases. So they're saying, they're being honest, and they're saying it's really hard to tell the difference between MS and Lyme disease. So this is all really current, 2013, that he's sharing. And if a physician were to do a spinal tap trying to differentiate between multiple sclerosis and from neurological Lyme disease, meaning the Borrelia has gotten into the central nervous system, they would find extremely similar results. As with multiple sclerosis, a central nervous system infection with Borrelia burgdorferi can cause an increased production in the IgG antibodies. Remember I said that's one of the things they're using to measure MS. They're looking at specific groups of antibodies, the IgG. So they're saying that, when the central nervous system is infected with Borrelia, they're finding an increase in IgG and antibodies. And they're also finding more lymphocytes, which is another group of immune cells in the spinal fluid. And they're finding increased protein, increased plasma cells, and those specific groups of antibodies that they use in their diagnostic tool for multiple sclerosis. So Lyme, that affects the central nervous system, can produce both of these groups, that the specific antibodies that they're looking for when they're diagnosing MS, so they can produce those antibodies, and ones that are not part of that group. Number 5, they can find, we find some cystic structures of Lyme disease. So Lyme disease can produce this type of a form, a life form, where it's really hard to treat. It's a cystic form, and it's called persistent Lyme. And it hides and it stays dormant until the time is just right for it to blossom in our body. So this is where maybe sometimes we will have treatment of Lyme disease and we'll feel better for a long time. And if you have persistent Lyme and you have these cysts, they will actually start to blossom and grow later on. Maybe when we have other infections, when our immune system is lower, many different reasons. So what they're finding is that this cyst form, that's one of the means by which Borrelia can persist in the body for long periods of time and under lots of adverse conditions for it. And it activates into normal mobile spirochetes, so it'll grow into that normal corkscrew bacteria when the conditions are right. And so one of the mysteries that really challenges these doctors, and even Dr. Horowitz in his practice, is that as more and more patients come in for help, a large number present themselves with symptoms of multiple sclerosis. So people that are coming to him with thinking they have Lyme disease, they really have a lot of the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. And those coming in for help said that the traditional standard of care approach had failed to provide them with answers for their illness. Why is this the case, he asks. Patients that suffer with multiple sclerosis often they complain of intermittent symptoms, right? The relapsing, remitting symptoms in different parts of their bodies, and that's very characteristic of Lyme also. Lyme will come and go and move around to different parts of the body, and MRIs of their brains show large amounts of white spots. So both of these symptoms and findings are seen in both Lyme disease and multiple sclerosis. And some people that come in, they're tested for Lyme, they come back with a negative test result. And we see this is very, very common, and doctors really struggle with this. That is the reason is when we are infected with Lyme, if you were to do a test immediately, they could pick it up because it's in your blood. But once you've had it for a while, it moves into your tissue. It moves out of the blood. It doesn't like to live in your blood vessels. So it'll move deep into, it'll infect your white blood cells. It'll move into your lymphatic system. It'll move into your tissue. And so that is why usually if you've had it for a while, if you were, let's say, infected years ago, it's not really going to show up on a blood test. That's the unfortunate thing. So they shared that both people that have multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease, they come back with these negative test results for Lyme. And what we do is we just give, the standard of care is to give people that suffer with multiple sclerosis these disease-modifying drugs. And many people, he says, are complaining that they're really not helping people with multiple sclerosis. And so I would say that they're just very tactfully saying that it's really hard to differentiate between the two. A lot of doctors and researchers feel that Lyme is most likely the cause, but obviously it hasn't been proven yet, so they can't say. However, just as with patients diagnosed with lupus or with rheumatoid arthritis, the drugs may not relieve their symptoms, or even if they do, we are just treating symptoms and we're not getting down to the root cause, and that's from Dr. Horowitz. Another doctor, Dr. Stephen Phillips, past president of ILADS, he presented evidence at a scientific conference that there was an association between multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease, and he also reported treating an abnormally high number of MS patients in his Lyme practice. So these doctors are starting to see that, there are so many people that have the multiple sclerosis symptoms and have the Lyme, and they come in for Lyme and they have the MS symptoms, or they have MS and they're treating for Lyme and they get better. So I just wanted to see if I missed something here. No, good. So Dr. Patricia Coyle presented research on how to differentiate between multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease at a certain conference. And what she shared, now this is really key again, both Lyme disease and multiple sclerosis cause optic neuritis, inflammation of the optic nerve, and blindness. Both cause white spots or demyelinating lesions, so those lesions visible on the MRI scan of the brain. Both can cause paralysis, tingling, and numbness of the extremities. Both can cause bladder dysfunction. Both have relapsing, remitting natures. Both diseases can cause high elevations of myelin basic protein. And remember those groups of antibodies that I told you about that are present, or they're looking for them in their diagnosis of MS, those IgG, and those are called oligoclonal bands. So they're finding those in the spinal fluid of MS and Lyme disease. So they're really saying that the only difference between these two diseases seems to be that with MS, there seems to be more lesions on the MRI and higher amounts of the protein and maybe a few more antibodies. And also Lyme disease, those lesions might be in a little bit different of a location in the central nervous system, but they said that those differences are so minimal and the boundaries between the two diseases are so easily blurred that one disease could certainly be mistaken for the other. So with that many similarities, it makes you start to wonder. So then going on to some other research. if you haven't seen this documentary, I've seen it many years ago, and it is called Under Your Skin. It is, I think you can watch it somewhere online, probably Food Matters. They have a really great library. It's like Netflix, but it's for health, and you can watch it there. You can probably stream it online, but watch it. It's really good. Under Our Skin documentary. I'm going to give you just a little quote by Dr. Alan McDonald. He is that wonderful hero doctor that has been finding nematodes in the spinal fluid of MS patients. I wanted to also ask you guys, as I'm going through this, please type in your comments, type in your questions, right? And even if you listen to the replay of this, please type in your questions because we do answer your questions. Dr. Alan McDonald shared, since spirochetes are the cause of neurodegenerative diseases like syphilis, could it be that the spirochetal infection of Lyme disease is partially or wholly responsible for some of the neurological diseases degenerative diseases that we face in our century today? So he thinks that ALS and MS and Parkinson's and also Alzheimer's disease are very likely linked with these spirochetes in the central nervous system. So Lyme disease, Borrelia in the central nervous system. He shared those named conditions have no known cause at this time. And in that same documentary, you're going to hear Dr. Klinghardt, who is one of my favorite hero doctors. He is such an amazing, smart, humble, caring person who has been helping so many people recover from Lyme disease and all kinds of neurological degenerative diseases. He shares, this is really profound, we never had in the past 5 years a single MS patient who did not test positive for Borrelia burgdorferi. Not a single one. That's really big. Not a single one. And his practice is all really chronically, neurologically sick people. And then another thing that I wanted to share with you. So in my first presentation about nematodes or parasites, thank you for all the love. In the first presentation, February the 14th, that was the date on the Facebook Live, I shared with you an amazing link. How many of you guys listened to it? I sure hope you did, because it is profound. Where Dr. McDonald, do a thumbs up if you watched it. And if you didn't, you got to watch it after. Good. So what I'd like you to do is watch that after, because he talks about how they're finding nematodes, these little worms, in the spinal fluid of people that suffer with multiple sclerosis. And these worms carry inside of them Borrelia, viruses, and probably many other things too, bacteria. And so what happens is they come in, they are living, they are mating, there's eggs, they're growing, and it's fine if they're living. It's not fine, obviously, because they can cause damage for sure, and they are probably maybe a big factor in the lesions that we're dealing with. But when they die, they release their Borrelia into our central nervous system. So that is one of the ways that we become infected with Borrelia. It may not have been from a tick. It may have been that we are on too many antibiotics or medications, and there was a compromise to the brain-blood barrier where these parasites get into our central nervous system, and they carry like a Trojan horse. Dr. McDonald says it's like a Trojan horse. The nematodes come in, and then as they have their they release these Borrelia as they die, and even as they're releasing their waste, we become more and more infected with Borrelia over time. And he shared he found a lot more worms than Borrelia in the MS patients that he saw. So this is the key, that's what I want you guys to understand, is that at the end, when I talk about all these infections after we go through this series, I'm going to help to put it all together, so that you can really understand how we're going to treat this. We're not just going to think, we're going to kill the nematodes and we're better, or we're going to just kill the Lyme and we're better. And it's hard to treat Borrelia. It's really tough to treat because they're a very stealth organism. So are parasites, all of them. They want to live, right, inside of us, and we don't want them. So that was really profound information from Dr. Alan McDonald. Now, this part really made me sad when I saw this. It really hit home to me because when I went over this research, it's just brutal because, you know, some of you can relate to the year when you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And if if I would have only seen the research in 1988 that they were finding spirochetes, you know, I could have chose a different path early on. Yeah, it would have taken me a little bit of time to figure out how to treat them, but at least I would have had some more clear direction. I'm not going to read all these studies, but I'm going to give you you can go through it yourself. I created an amazing resource for you. We're going to post it in the feed and in the top probably in the feed of the comments. Maybe Danielle will post it in there. And it's called Evidence That Multiple Sclerosis is an Infectious Agent. And you can read through that all yourself. That's what I want you to share. Share it with other people that have MS. Share it with your doctors. Show them that there is a true cause of MS. We have to stop this. It's time, right? It's absolute time. So number one, this is a lecture. I got this information from a lecture by an amazing microbiologist, Tom Greer, and I'm sure that he is somebody who suffered with Lyme disease. That is how these hero researchers and hero doctors are stepping out of the traditional approach and looking for other answers because they don't like the way they're suffering. So he shared there are more than 50 MS spirochete references prior to World War II and going back as far as 1911. So 1911 is the first one I'm going to share with you. And this was published in The Lancet, which is a very prestigious medical journal, research journal. 1911, Bizarre Spirochetes in MS. That was published in The Lancet. And I'm not going to read all of the titles. I'm just going to give you the dates so that you can see that there is a whole string of research that has been going on since 1911. So 1913, another study. 1917, 1918, another one in 1918, one in 1919, one in 1921. 1, 2, 3, 3 in 1922, and then another study about linking spirochetes and multiple sclerosis in 1923, another one in 1924, 2 in 1927. These are all listed. You'll be able to look at them after, but I'm just showing you. 1928, another scientific study, MS and spirochetes. 1933, 1939, 1948, 1952, 1954. And then I want to share something really amazing. In 1957, there was a microbiologist, also a researcher, who shared that multiple sclerosis from 1911 to 1939, you find that in France, in Germany, and in England, there are independent researchers all observing similar things and coming to similar conclusions. Number one, spirochetes are often found in conjunction with the lesions in the brains of patients who have died with multiple sclerosis. So this is a lady, a microbiologist study, or 1957, sorry, it is a study, this is not just one person, but 1957 study. So they are finding spirochetes in the lesions of people that have died from multiple sclerosis. Then also they're finding that these spirochetes can be isolated and can infect many animal models, so they can isolate them and they can reinfect different animal models, mice, rats, hamsters, guinea pigs, rabbits, dogs, and primates, which would be like monkeys. Also, the spirochetes can be re-isolated from the brains of the infected animals and inoculated into more uninfected animals. So they're literally taking the spirochetes from the lesions of people that have died from MS. They are inoculating them into other animals and they're causing the same thing in them. And then they're taking spirochetes from those infected animals and they're able to re-inoculate other animals. 1957, that was. Now this is a big one. Time magazine, 1957. Multiple sclerosis victims, about 250,000 in the US, were anxiously wondering about a possible cure for their mysterious disease, which is marked by near total loss of muscular control. Philadelphia bacteriologists, so that is the same researcher, reported success in cultivating an obscure microbe, a spirochete, which she found in the spinal fluid of MS patients. So multiple sclerosis, so what she concluded is that multiple sclerosis is caused by the spirochete. An early attack, or could this lead to a cure? That was in 1957 in Time magazine. So now I'm just going to read to you just a couple of studies more recent. And I'm not going to read the abstracts, but just so you know the dates and that there is an enormous string of research. And there's not a lot of research, and there's lots of reasons why, but this is a continual, and it started as early that we can see 1911. So this study, the spirochete and multiple sclerosis, 1958. Multiple sclerosis is a chronic central nervous system infection by a spirochete agent, 1988. That's sad. That's when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Lyme borreliosis, which means Lyme infection, and multiple sclerosis, any connection? A seroepidemic study, and that is in the year 2000. And then another book, so this is a book that was written, is called Cell Wall Deficient Forms, and it's talking about stealth pathogens. And she shared in there from blood and from more than 60 spinal fluids of MS cases, it has been possible to grow Borrelia-like organisms in a special medium. And a lot of this information that I'm sharing with you relates to not just MS, but also ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's disease. And so it could be, I'm just talking, but it could be that maybe with Alzheimer's they have more Borrelia, and it might be that we have maybe nematodes and Borrelia, or we also have fungal. So what I'm saying is that the Lyme is associated with all those diseases. That's what they're finding. And then another study, 2005, chronic Lyme infection at the root of multiple sclerosis is a cure with antibiotics attainable. And then the last studies here that I just wanted to share, a couple of them, and then we're going to wrap it up and just kind of try to make sense of all of this. Controversies in late Lyme neuroborreliosis, which means Lyme infection. So controversies in late neuroborreliosis and multiple sclerosis case series, 2009. And then 2012, Lyme disease in patients with multiple sclerosis, clinical, diagnostic, and therapeutic features. The last one, 2017, unusual manifestation of neuroborreliosis case report. So somebody with MS they were able to diagnose him with Lyme disease and multiple sclerosis. And then one last one, infectious agents and neurodegenerative diseases exploring the links, 2017. So this study relates to ALS, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, and I can't remember if it was Parkinson's also. So I just shared with you some really profound information that I really hope that you help us to share the word, to get this information out. What I've seen in the past 5 years is that there are so many more healthcare professionals that are open to this and that are so interested in this, and they're starting to study this. There are many neurologists and university departments that are starting to study this. What this means for you is that, number one, in order for you to really treat and recover from multiple sclerosis or another chronic illness, is you have to understand what you're dealing with first. And that's my whole point over these weeks, over this series, is to help you to really understand, oh my goodness, this is as clear as day that I am dealing with infection, right? That's so that nobody can rock you. So that if you go to an integrative doctor and they say, oh no, there's no research that shows that, it's like, you're like, no, I know for sure. I've seen enough studies. I'm sorry, maybe you're not up on it, but you wouldn't say that to them, obviously. You would be very respectful, but you know in your heart, right, that it is infection. That's the big thing. And when you truly understand, you believe it. It's not what Pam said. It's not what one study said. It's what this whole trail of research has said since 1911, right? Then you can start to say, okay, well, if it is infection, Now I've got to start to find the best ways to treat this infection. And unfortunately, because we have not gone down this path, we have not invested in understanding which infections are the most prevalent in chronic disease. We don't have good tests either. So this is where really what I found is that the way to get better is you have to take that role on yourself. You have to become the director of your health. Yes, you're still going to work with integrative healthcare professionals, and they're very important. They're great for certain blood work that you want to have done, or maybe you need to have let's say an anti-parasitic pharmaceutical. Yes, but the biggest role is on your shoulders. And when you do that, then you can be like me. You can beat chronic disease, you can recover, and then you can get your life back and you can live an amazing life. And really that's what you need to do. So what can you do in the meanwhile with between now and as we're going through this? Number one, you can start to clean up your eating plan. You can take out all of the sugars, all of the processed carbs, all of the dairy, all of the gluten, all of the grains, and you can start eating more and more vegetables. Listen to your body. If you have any type of inflammatory bowel disease, you know which vegetables don't agree with you, but just start to increase the low carb vegetables that agree with you, and start to drink more water, and start to just take out all the processed foods and go back to eating a lower carb, high vegetable, and healthy fats are fine. Start with that eating plan. And if you are ready, if you're like, Pam, I want to be a wellness champion. I want to beat this. I'm so ready. I get it that it's infection. I'm at a place where I've tried so many things and this makes sense to me and I'm ready to go. Then watch my free training. My free training is so loaded with the steps that we take, the rationale why, how these infections are affecting us. There are a ton of case studies of people that have recovered, wellness champions. Many of you are on right now with us. And so what you would need to do is just watch the training video. And if you want to be a wellness champion, just follow the instructions and you can start right away. And we have people joining us all the time. So we have a system, a proven system that will help you to recover. But the first step is that you have to understand what the problem is. You can't treat a mystery, right? You can't treat a mystery. And the problem is that the disease-modifying drugs that we're using, they do not treat infection. They don't treat infection. And that is why we become sicker and sicker and sicker in time. What they're doing is they're suppressing our immune system. So if we have a war going on in our body, and so the infections, the Borrelia and fungus, like Candida and other fungi, and nematodes, and possibly other, we're going to talk about viruses next week. So there's all of these different microbes that, the viruses are not living, but the other ones are, and they are the enemy, right? And we have our immune system that is trying to defend us, but unfortunately the war is not in their favor. They're overwhelmed with infection. So what do? We say, oh, well, these stupid B cells, we're just going to wipe them out with chemotherapy. We don't need them. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. It makes a lot more sense to say, let's get rid of the infections. Let's keep our immune system so that we can deal with, our body will get stronger as we take the load off. And then our immune system can start to take care of us again, support it. So this is where, sometimes we've thought that, we're not smart enough to know about all this science stuff. But when you start to look into it, it's like, oh my goodness, this is common sense. We need our antibodies. We need our B cells. But sometimes the war is out of balance and we have to support our body. And that's why we have to be the director of our health. So please share this with others. Please listen to my free training. If you're sick and tired of living with disease, you'll hear my story, how I've recovered, how many other people are recovering. And the whole premise is to treat these infections. We have to do things before that, but we have to treat these infections. So with that, I'm going to see if there's any questions from you. Lots of comments. So thank you for all of the love and the hearts. You're so welcome, Joanna. Extremely useful and really sad too, eh? It made me really sad when I saw all those studies. You're so welcome, Janet, for all the information. And Shauna Lee, I think I have diabetes. Is this caused by infection? Absolutely. what you'll see is that when you've had one chronic disease for a while, and that is caused by infections, and then a lot of times we'll be using different medications, and also the infections get stronger and stronger, and our immune system gets weaker and weaker, and other infections move in. And so then we end up with, and they live in different parts of the body, they like different parts. Some like our eyes, some like the central nervous system, some like to go in our joints, then some live in our liver and our pancreas and our gallbladder. And so we end up with multiple infections, and then we can get multiple disease labels, and then we end up on more and more medications, and it just destroys our life. We end up in an extended care facility, we die early, and that's, so we need to start to chisel away at these infections. And yes, lots of people have recovered from diabetes. I've had students in my program that maybe one of the spouses has MS and the other spouse has diabetes. They followed the same plan, and the person that had diabetes no longer needed their medication. We work with our doctors, we work as a team, but I'm teaching you how to play that active role in your healthcare. You have to do that if you want an amazing life. That has to be your responsibility. Yes, Mary, it is so incredibly sad. Maureen, in other words, 2018 MS should not exist. Absolutely, absolutely. It should not exist at this time, and it makes you very sad. Actually, I cried when I went through all that research. I'm just like, I know people that I went to a hairdresser one time. Her son was 21 years old. He died at 21, and he was in the hospital, she shared, and his mom was crying, and she's like, he was just looking out at me like, help me, save me. And he had tubes, and they were feeding him Ensure, which is just chemical soup with sugar. The doctors didn't know any better. They did their very best. They didn't know it was infection. And once she knew about it, she was like, my son could still be here. So there are thousands of people like that. We have a young lady right now in our hometown. She's 28 years old in an extended care home. Shouldn't be there. It's not right. You guys have to help me get this message out. It's time, right? You guys are the leaders. I attract the leaders and the trailblazers. It is brutally sad. Carlos, you are so welcome. And Stephanie, are they finding lesions on the spinal cord as well as the brain? I know it's the central nervous system, the brain, the spinal fluid. So I would assume so. This is where we do more digging in the research. It's all connected, right? It's all open to each other. All right, Mary, you will message Stacy. Awesome, thank you, Sharon. You tested negative for Lyme in 2003. Just be aware that most people, the very best tests, the Western blot, it's 80% false negative tests. So if you were infected years ago, then chances are that the Lyme is no longer living in your blood, and when you have that test done, they can't pick it up. That's a normal thing that all of these Lyme litter doctors know that. All right, and hi Mary and Stacy, you were diagnosed. And hello, okay, I'm just seeing if there's any other last questions here. It makes so much sense and it gives us answers, absolutely. Your information is so informative. I'm so happy, Mary, that it's really, a light bulb goes off for many of you. It just really helps us to understand that, you know, if you're on path one, and that's what I decided a long time ago. We're gonna wrap it up here. When I was first diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I really believe it's by the grace of God that I was introduced to the idea that multiple sclerosis is caused by chronic silent infections in the body. I was given one book, and that book was called The Yeast Connection, and they were talking about fungal overgrowth causing all kinds of chronic disease. In those days, those hero doctors didn't know Lyme, they didn't know parasites, etc., but they did know that fungal overgrowth was present. And so what I did is I decided early on to take a different path. I decided to treat the cause, because that gave me so much more hope than to just become disabled, try these drugs to maybe, hopefully they would slow it down. But what we're seeing is that they don't work. When these drugs are out for 10 to 20 years, the research is showing that they don't work because they're not treating the infections. So if you want your life back. You have to take a different path. And maybe you have been sick for a long time. You think, is there any hope for me? I've had it for 20 or 30 years. I cannot promise full recovery to everyone, but what I can tell you is that when you effectively treat the infections, so this is a little bit of trial and error, you've got to find out which bugs are bugging you and find the right therapy. And once you get the right therapy, it's like magic, right? It's like you find the right treatment to kill the specific infections. And then you find the disease will stop for sure, and you're going to have a ton of recovery. All right. And we're finding a lot of people where their balance comes back, their spasticity goes away. Some people are coming out of wheelchairs, drop foot can resolve. So just because you have a lot of damage, don't write your body off, right? See how much recovery you can have. If it is inflammation, that can be reversed. If it is permanent damage to the myelin sheath, that cannot be reversed at this time. But what we're seeing is that there's so much that can be recovered that we did not know could be recovered. All right, so I hope that gives you a lot of hope. I'm going to be back here next week, same time, same place. I'm going to be talking about the link between multiple sclerosis and viruses. So we'll talk to you soon. Take care and bye-bye for now.